Hi, and welcome to today's podcast where I get to speak with an old friend of mine, Damon Hayhow, who is the architect of Recomp and has been around the bodybuilding and powerlifting industry for some 20-something plus years. So it'd be great to shoot the breeze a bit with Damon and talk about some different topics to do with strength training and key ingredients to success, how to lift weights, what kind of attitude we need to take us to another level, that kind of thing. So stay tuned, should be a great chat. Hi and welcome to my podcast, Damon Hayhow.
It's an honour to be here, Ingrid. Thank you very much for having me.
Look, I'll tell you the truth, Damon, I was excited, and when I decided that I was going to do some podcasts, I knew that I definitely have to have you on and have a bit of a chat with you.
Get a little bit of controversy in there early on, huh?
Why not? Yeah, I like to have a bit of fun. And look, a lot of my followers on my Facebook fan page Figure It Out, some of them will be a little bit familiar with you because occasionally I refer to you, having been that you were a past coach of mine. But for those that are not so familiar, you are the founder and president of Recomp HQ and the architect.
Recomp. Yeah, not Recomp HQ. That's actually my brother's. So
right. Recomp. Yeah. And architect of Recomposer.
Correct,
yes. And you have been labelled as a bodybuilder and a power lifter, but I'm not quite sure how you label yourself.
Some other people have said that once before in the deep, dark past, yes.
I find it funny that when I Googled you, the first thing I found was a link, and it said, "Hi, I'm Damon Hayhow. I am bald and not very tall, but everything I say is interesting." And I thought, well, that's
totally true.
Look, you might be bald, you might not be very tall, but I still think that you're kind of a handsome rooster there, Damon. So I tell you, I then in the website, the first thing that came up was, why fitness is shitness. Can you please explain?
Yeah, look, it's that's a fairly long-winded. It could be a very long-winded answer, but the gist of it is that the fitness industry is part of the health industry, and its interests are in taking the average person who has a very high likelihood of dying of cancer or heart disease and making them not die of cancer or heart disease. And that's basically the sole outcome that it seeks. It has absolutely no care or concern with your abdominal muscles or how peachy your bottom is or how bulgy your biceps are. It just cares that you're not going to die of anything very soon. So go for a walk 3 times per week. Don't be inactive. Don't eat crappy food, and you're good to go. The fact that you look like crap, feel like crap, and function like crap from the perspective of any kind of athlete is irrelevant, because that's not the job of the health and fitness industry. So the problem is that there's a lot of people out there who don't understand that, and they think that health and fitness is actually the attainment of lean muscularity and high energy levels and athletic capability and all these other things that it isn't meant to be. And so if your expectations are set up here where you're wanting an amazing ripped athletic physique and performance, and you then use health and fitness methods to try to achieve it, you're going to wind up sorely disappointed, because relative to a good body and athleticism, fitness is actually training for shitness. It is the lowest level of performance you could possibly have before actually being injured or diseased, because the definition of health and fitness is just the absence of illness and injury. So if you're not sick or injured, you've already achieved all the health and fitness that you're ever expected to achieve, and that's the end of it. If you want something more, you need to train for something completely different. So, yeah, the point of pointing out fitness is shitness is that all the people who are doing their cardio and their muscle activation and all these other wonderful health and fitness activities in the hope of achieving athleticism, they're actually training in the opposite, in the wrong direction completely, and they're generally going to fail horribly. And that then leads to all of the other problems of drug abuse and eating disorders and injuries and all the rest of it, as people get frustrated and they keep pursuing the wrong path for the wrong outcome. So,
Okay. So could you tell the listeners a little bit about, just a little bit about your background, and then a little bit about Recomposer, the software, and what it's designed to do? I think that would be really helpful.
sure. Well, I was actually the pinnacle of health and fitness. I was 56 kilos, absolutely, depressed with my skinniness and my pathetic weakness. I could barely bench press 25 kilos for 9 reps. I couldn't lift the 10th rep with a bar and a 2.5 kilo plate on the other side of it. So I was painfully thin, painfully weak, and therefore the epitome of health and fitness. And so I said, I want to become unfit and unhealthy. I want to become lean, muscular, big, strong, and basically put on a suit of muscular armor to hide all of my insecurities behind, like pretty much every short man bodybuilder does. And so I started training and got right into it, and started following the popular methodologies, and found that A, they didn't make sense, and B, they didn't work very well on me because I'm a naturally skinny, weak person. And so I was fortunate enough to fall in with some very good bodybuilders early on who taught me what hard work was and taught me to do less but do it better, and to actually train to become strong. And I went on within a few years to win the nationals in bodybuilding and set Australian records that still stand 20 years later. And lift some heavy stuff and look pretty decent for 5 seconds, painted brown, covered in oil on a stage. So out of that, I had 1 or 2 disagreements with well-known people in the industry about how things should be done. And
1 or 2?
1 or 2, yeah, maybe a third in there somewhere. I forget now. And so I decided to start my own business, which was called Logic Labs, and say to the world, either sink or swim, succeed or fail. There's a better way to do everything. If no one cares to listen, well, I go broke, and at least I answered the question. And if it works, it works. And so it worked. I sold that business, but in the process, realized that we needed to support the providing of the programs and diets to clients with some kind of technological solution that would also protect the business from trainers who would leave and want to take all of the intellectual property of the business with them. And so I had a background in web systems design and development. So I designed the Recomposer software, and we built that and then licensed that out to other trainers who also needed to do the same thing. And that's where we are today. So.
Yeah. Over the course of my career, I've done a few degrees and a few courses and a few, a bit of upskilling. But one of the things that I'm really glad that I did was I came along to you and became a Recomp specialist coach. Now, what I really like about that is what the actual criteria was for that, and I'd love it if you could share that with the listeners. And what actually made you come up with that Recomp specialist coach idea? Because clearly you weren't happy with the certificate 4 qualified personal trainer.
Yeah, well, that was one of the other things when I started Biologic Labs was um, this a little bit before that. I'd kind of finally I had the light bulb moment, and I realized that all of my grievances with the fitness industry were misdirected. It wasn't that the fitness industry was wrong; it was that I was wrong. It was that my belief that the fitness industry meant bodybuilding and bodybuilding training and all the rest of those sorts of things was completely incorrect. It has nothing to do with it. And so it was, well, okay, so I'm not opening a fitness business. I'm opening a coaching business where strength coaches, because that's the essence of what building a lean muscular physique is about. You lift weights, you get strong. And that's when I learned that the fitness trainer insurance doesn't actually even cover any kind of bodybuilding training or any other sports training, not powerlifting training or any training that could be mistaken for being sports coaching or bodybuilding training. So none of the personal trainers out there doing it were actually insured for doing it or even qualified for doing it. The certificate 3 and 4 in fitness are in what I explained fitness is. It's about getting your average sedentary person off their bum and doing some exercise, which is a noble pursuit, of course, and absolutely essential to society, but that doesn't mean that it's a solution to bodybuilding. Bodybuilding's a completely different thing, and extreme fat loss, muscle growth, and all those things needed a different insurance product, a different qualification process, and everything else. But there's a complication, which is that bodybuilding itself as an activity, and this is all development of your physique, getting leaner and more muscular than health and fitness is bodybuilding. So I'm not just talking about competitive bodybuilding, but bodybuilding as a sport isn't actually formally recognized by any kind of education institution, sporting institution, government, sports associations like the Australian Sports Commission here in Australia doesn't recognise bodybuilding as a sport. The Olympics don't recognise bodybuilding as a sport. And so because it's not an actual thing, it's not a formally recognised activity, you can't have academic qualifications in it because you can't have formal coaches in it because it doesn't actually formally exist. It's a stupid little quirky bureaucratic bunch of crap that actually has a profound effect. And again, it's one of those things that it's like years ago, I remember the Weider brothers, Joe and Ben Weider, pushing to get bodybuilding recognized at the Olympics. I never understood or cared. It was who would care. But now, as I've gotten older and wiser and seen how the world works, a little bit wiser, but you start to understand that these things are profound. So there's no academic qualification. There's virtually no real research into bodybuilding either. So any of the academic studies that you hear about aren't studies on bodybuilding typically. They tend to be studies about other things that are borrowed by bodybuilders. So they're looking at solutions for burn victims and people who have wasting diseases or are athletes in other sports and they need to put on some weight as opposed to lean muscle while dropping body fat. There's all these different things that kind of come into it and bastardize the research, I guess, for want of a better term. And so I looked at the idea of creating a qualification, but I don't have the highest regard for formal education, the process, and the competence of the people who come out of a university at actually doing the thing. The dictionary definition of academic is not of practical relevance, and I'm all about practical relevance. So I decided that what was really needed was to give the industry back to the people who were the best at it. And there are some exceptional coaches in Australia and around the world, not necessarily people whose methods I agree with or understand. And I didn't want to put my fingerprints all over it and go, you need to be qualified by Damon Hayhow, because I wouldn't care to be qualified by Damon Hayhow. So, excuse me. So I asked the question, how can I create a qualification without creating a qualification? And I basically went, well, there's three core competencies to body recomposition, and one is the training, the second is the diet, And then the third is being able to put diet and training together in order to manifest a change in body composition that was the change that you wanted, not just a random thing happening. So I went, well, okay, how do we assess that? And that's where I came up with, we do a strength test. If you're a competent coach, you'll at least be able to lift above average weights in the most basic fundamental exercises, the bench squat and the deadlift. If you are a good experienced coach, you will already know sports nutrition as it pertains to body recomposition. So all of the kinds of usual things that bodybuilders do, that's actually very, very sophisticated sports nutrition. It's way beyond what a lot of sports nutritionists even use. And then you just have to follow a diet and program that you wrote for yourself for a period of time and achieve a substantial change in your body composition. And those are the assessments. So I then went to an insurance company and I said, look, there's this vocation of bodybuilding that actually isn't insured by anyone yet. This is the program that I want to put in place, and this is what the insurance needs to cover. And would you sign off on that and recognize and agree it? And they said yes, and that's where we are today. So we were able to get an insurance product for personal trainers to do bodybuilding coaching and preparation and diet, not on the basis of going to school to learn a bunch of stuff which doesn't actually exist because no one's created that course, but by proving that they have the applied competence to achieve the results.
Yeah, and I guess that's why I really like that. That's why I wanted to obtain that qualification, if you like, in that you're no longer just I guess regurgitating textbooks. You can walk the walk and talk the talk as well. And and that
you can do what it's supposed to be, but without actually saying you have to do it the same way as everybody else, because there is more than one way to skin a cat in this case.
Yes.
And it's a recipe. So if a person puts together a different recipe to me or to somebody else, but they can get the result, I'm kind of, the proof's in the pudding.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks a lot, because I think that's really informative. And for those that are listening, they can of course jump on your website and have a look at perhaps obtaining that qualification themselves. It's a terrific it's a terrific adjunct to something like a human movement degree, I think. But
well, it is. It's only meant for people who practice the craft.
Yes.
So they've got as you know, there's the prerequisite of having at least 2 years full time as the primary occupation on your tax return, is how we provide the documentary evidence. So that it's not just for any person who knows how to pass a test or lift some heavy weights, but it's actually for people who are professional coaches, and that's what their career is. It's not meant to be a qualification for people who just collect titles and pieces of paper. It's meant to just be a practical thing to just go, well, you can't be insured for doing this otherwise. So you already lift the weights, just get assessed, and then you already train and diet every week anyway. So just get it measured, pass the test. It shouldn't be at all difficult or disruptive to your life. Just show that you know what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot for enlightening. That's great. So I thought that something that might be a little bit fun was to play a game with you, Damon.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We're going to play a game.
Oh, so I hope it's not having to lift anything compared to you, because I can't lift what you lift.
No. You'll know the game well. It's a word association game. So I'm going to throw some words at you, or I might create a short context, and you just throw out a word or two that comes to mind when I say my words, and then
is this PG? No explicit lyrics allowed, or
this is Damon Hayhow. You tell it how it is. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. And if I poke a bear or two, we'll come back and explore those. We'll explore those growly bears, okay?
I'll put the bear on sedatives.
So I've got 15 odd words here, and let's start with winged angel division in bodybuilding competitions.
That's it.
Okay, creatine.
Good stuff, overrated, has its application.
Red meat.
Love it. Awesome.
Time under tension training.
Misunderstood grossly.
Fitness Australia.
A necessary organisation.
Growth hormone bellies.
Growth hormone
Bellies.
bellies. Another shocking misunderstanding.
PEDs.
Another grossly misunderstood thing. There's a theme to this, isn't there? Yeah.
No, not really. Nutrient timing.
Massively overrated, unimportant, and generally irrelevant.
Okay, deadlifts.
The daddy of all training.
Intermittent fasting.
Great diet for sumo wrestlers.
Game changer.
The movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Transparent propaganda nonsense.
Foam rollers.
Why?
Why? Functional training.
Dysfunctional training.
In a gym setting, the words I can't.
True.
Carbohydrates.
Energy.
All right, thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
There are some things there, obviously, that the bear could have taken and run with. So
yes, I know. Absolutely.
I think it's like all of these things, though. The world doesn't really have time for nuance or consideration, because there's already so much information out there about absolutely everything these days, and everything's just been propagandized into just ridiculousness. All those topics that you mentioned, it's like there's a time and a place, and then there's a time and a place not, and they seem to be always applied to the time and place not.
With deadlifts, like you said, the daddy of them all, and it's interesting when you might be having a conversation at a party and someone says, "Oh, do you work out?" They'll invariably say, "What do you bench?" But you think that's the wrong question, don't you?
No, well, what do you bench is always it used to be a guy question, really, and really it was basically how big are you. It's just the exercise everybody knows. So as a standard that everybody's done, that's why it was relevant. Is it the best way of measuring strength? I don't think anyone who knows anything about strength would argue that it is. It's a foundational exercise. It's excellent for what it's used for. But if you really wanted to measure the strength of a person, technically, it's like, well, there's a bar on the ground. Can you pick it up? It's not a question of skill. It's a question of just pure raw strength and grit, whether it gets to the top or not. Where every other exercise has a massive element of skill in it. So
like the squat or the bench. So back when I jumped on board with you, which was, I might add, after a fair bit of research, because I was a little bit fussy over who I was going to work with.
Rightly so, after 20 years of seeing what was around.
Yeah, but I wanted someone who had some of the same ideas, the same kind of ethos, but that I needed someone who knew a lot more than me, which you do. But I do recall when you set me up with my initial nutrition, which we collaboratively devised together. I remember you saying something. I don't know if you'll remember this, but I still remember it to this day, and it's kind of really stuck with me. And that was, I said to you, what happens if I don't stick to my diet? And you said, well, just why wouldn't you stick to the diet? But you said the one thing that I don't want you to do is I don't want you to consume alcohol. And I said, okay, well, I'm not that much of a drinker. That won't be a problem. And you said, I would rather, and this is pretty much a quote, Damon, I would rather that you take chemotherapy drugs than you drink alcohol. Now, that was...
I don't think I'd literally say that I'd rather you take chemotherapy, but I would have said something like, yeah, alcohol is more damaging than chemotherapy, yeah.
Yeah, it was something very similar. You know, on my page, a lot of the readers do acquiesce to having a wine or two, particularly when stressed or at the end of the week. And I was just wondering if you could just talk through a little bit on your knowledge on just how damaging is alcohol to muscle, Damon?
Well, it's been an interesting observation in, literally decades of testing people that acute alcohol consumption just causes the reversal of generally the last 2 weeks to 2 months worth of diet and training results. Understanding that when I say that, we're meaning that we're measuring body composition, not body weight. We're actually measuring the lean mass and the fat mass and how it's changed each week. So we've got a full record of how a person's body is changing right down to the very, very fine details. And most people want to ask me, well, what mechanism does it cause this reversal by? And it's like, I don't know. I don't care. If it didn't do it, I wouldn't report it. But very, very consistently, if a person's been dieting well, training well, making positive changes to their body, and then they consume even just 2 to 3 glasses of wine, of alcohol, 2 to 3 serves, then typically, and not for absolutely every person, but for the vast majority of people, they will lose 1 to 2 kilos of muscle and replace it with 1 to 2 kilos of fat almost overnight. It makes no sense. It doesn't make it. It's not even physiologically possible as far as I'm aware, but it happens, and it happens consistently. And because we track people's training performance against their muscle mass, we then happen to see, again, coincidentally, we happen to see their performances drop by about exactly the amount we would expect had they really lost that amount of muscle. So it's not a dehydration effect. It's not, it doesn't necessarily show up the day after the test, but sort of a week after, there it is. And it'll take 2, 3, 4 plus weeks to undo the damage. Now, if this isn't an acute sense, so if a person hasn't drunk for months and then they suddenly have a few drinks, then that will happen. If they drink on a regular basis, then their rate of body composition change decreases by around about 90% on what we would expect that person to have achieved otherwise. So if they don't, it doesn't mean that they cannot make progress, because obviously that would be ridiculous. It does not mean that every time anyone drinks, they always lose another 1 to 2 kilos of muscle and replace it with fat. It happens once. If they drink again, there may be a little bit more. If they keep drinking for a few weeks, we've seen people lose entire years of diet and training in 2 weeks on the booze. We've seen staggering reversals in positive body composition change from drinking. We've also seen some people who do manage to make positive changes to their body while drinking on a regular basis. But like I say, there's nothing that can slow it down more dramatically. From our point of view, the worst thing about this is it means that we can't assess the diet and training anymore. Because when you throw in this extra drug, that just drugs the body fat. It's like the anti-anabolic steroid. It's more negative than anabolic steroids could ever possibly dream of being positively. And it means that if we've given you a diet and a training program and we're trying to figure out is it appropriate and working, but you drink, then we're left going, well, we know that thing is more profound than anything we could do with a diet and training. So now we can't tell you whether the diet's worth doing or anything else. It just leaves you ignorant. So from my point of view, I just go, if you need to drink, I understand that. We live in an alcoholic society, but don't waste your money or my time. It's just not worth it if you keep doing that, because it's literally just, for most people, a complete waste of time.
Yeah.
It's that bad.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But it's, excuse me, my partner many years ago, she would drink a couple of times per year and she would know exactly what it was going to do. And she would just be like, yep, I'm going to go out, I'm going to drink, I'm going to party. It's going to take me at least 4 to 6 weeks to fix the damage from what I'm going to do at that one night where I'm going to have some drinks. And I'm prepared to do that because I want to have, my birthday drinks. It's like, cool. If that's what you want to do, then, that's fine. It's not judging it. It's just going, understand this is where it is. Yeah.
And this is what the ramifications are going to be.
Correct. Yeah. Make your own choices. It doesn't bother me. Yeah.
But this is one of the reasons that I wanted to talk with you, is because you have seen so many transformations. Like, you deal with, muscle gain, muscle loss, fat loss. That's exactly right. Yeah. And so you start to gather a really good sense of, what's damaging and what works. I remember, again, when I first came on board with you, I was quite obsessed with, I was obsessed with quite a few things, and I had to get rid of, a lot of, almost a lot of habits. One of the things that I kept asking you was, in that first week when you gave me my nutrition plan, well, what about the timing? Like, what do I have before training? What do I have after training? Now, I'd like you to share your response to me with everyone that's listening to the podcast, because, when you've had it drilled into you that if you don't get your protein shake in immediately after you put down your last dumbbell, and you've got to have
that's right. Yeah. You're going to lose the window of opportunity, and your entire year's progress will be lost because you were 5 minutes late.
Exactly. So tell me more about this. Why do you, because even in the word game, I said nutrient timing and you say irrelevant.
Well,
that would upset a lot of people.
Yeah, a lot of what I say upsets a lot of people. But, where do I attack this one from? The thing is that the fact that you put the food in your mouth at that particular time speaks nothing to what's going into your bloodstream at any particular time. You've got no idea what's going into your bloodstream. I talked to a vegetarian, and the steak that I ate 20 years ago is still digesting in my stomach now. So I don't know, and I don't care. All I can go by is I put a certain sum total of food into my mouth every single day. I spread it over the day, over the waking hours as much as I possibly can. You eat the same quantities of the same things every single day. You measure the result at the end of the week, and you make your adjustments based on how your body has responded to what you ate. And the idea that there's going to be a radically profound difference in your body composition at the end of 12 months of eating really good, wholesome food all day, every day, throughout the entire year, training really hard, and because you had the meal 5 minutes before or after a particular event, it's going to completely turn you into a different person. It's just absurd. Why would it? And from a biological standpoint, you go, do you really think the human body is so sensitive that if we've gone out and we've cut trees all day because we're lumberjacks living out in the caveman area or whatever, but that all of a sudden we'd keel over dead because we were 5 minutes late to a meal or something like that? Like, The body's an amazingly resilient creature. You stick food down your neck, it goes in at some point, some percentage of it's absorbed and digested. I don't care, because I can measure what I eat and I can measure what it does, and I can make adjustments with what I can work with. The difference between having this particular type of food at this particular time, I can't measure what it does. And when I've tried to, it's made no difference. It's, you know what it's like, you miss your shake, your year still keeps going exactly the same. And you found out shortly afterwards, it's, just eat your food.
And what my experience, and I'm sure what you've just said is actually a relief to some listeners, because you become a real slave to the clock and to time, and it becomes really stressful.
But the irony for me is also is like I said, you guys, it's a very simple philosophical premise that I use. Eat the same quantities of the same things every day. Measure how your body changed at the end of the week. There's your answer to what that diet does.
Yeah.
Period, paragraph, nothing left. You don't need to understand how. You don't need to understand why. You don't anyway. You're just making up stories if you say you do. And and still, even if you do understand how all the stuff happens, at the end of the week, if you don't get the result that you want, you make the same change to your diet anyway. Like, this is what I ate. This is what happened. It wasn't what I want, so I'm going to change what I eat. That's the answer to your question. With the nutrient timing crowd, I so often find that they don't eat the same quantities of the same things every day. They aren't strict with their diet through the other 23 hours of every single day. They're obsessed with this window thing to the expense of the entire diet. And you're going, which do you really think is more important? The 5 minutes that you had your protein shake, or just eating your food so your body's regularly fueled?
Yeah.
And the final thing I will say is just for the real believers, the research into, when you actually look into the research about the nutrient timing and the anabolic window and this, that, and the other thing, the research said that it's actually protein with carbs prior to the workout that leads to increased protein synthesis post-workout, not post-workout protein with carbs, but pre-workout protein and carbs. But the only way for them to actually test whether that was considerably different to not having protein and carbs before the workout was to make sure that the other test subjects didn't have any protein or carbs for 6 hours prior to the workout. And so you've got to ask the question, who do you know in the bodybuilding community who does not eat for 6 hours before their workout and then expects to have a killer workout? Nobody. So if we train in the afternoons or the evenings, it means we've already had 3 or 4 full meals. We've had a couple of thousand calories put down our neck over the preceding several hours of our workout, in which case this whole idea of you need protein with carbs prior to your workout has already been solved. So, I can argue the point from any direction that you want to. It's just, but yeah, I go with the simple one. Eat your food, shut up.
Yeah. Well, so that leads me to a query. What do you as a coach actually say to people that say, I'm struggling with my diet? How do you deal with that, and what do you say to them?
How are you struggling, and how do we make it work?
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. It's I've often said it's the same with training as diet, that the best program in the world that you cannot follow is not the best program in the world. It's an academic irrelevance. So if you need to make compromises to make something work for a certain person, then those are the compromises that you make. If you can say to them, this is probably a deal breaker compromise in some cases, but let's do it and see.
Yeah.
And usually for most people, it's one of those things of, we've got, my favorite example is the chocoholic clients, where it's like they keep on cheating on their diet with chocolate. It's like, okay, well, let's make sure that you have to eat an amount of chocolate every single day.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a great idea, but let's measure it and see what happens. And so you put the chocolate in their diet every day, and suddenly they're strict to the whole diet. And it might go a lot better than it was going before. So then you go, okay, could we pull a little bit of the chocolate out? You pull a little bit of the chocolate out, the results double. And all of a sudden the person goes, oh, there's a payoff to not having the chocolate in my diet. Let's try a week without the chocolate. And and then let them make the judgment call at what point it's worth it.
But that's really important when it comes to being able to stick with a plan, is to give the person the reins to kind of dictate their nutrition anyway.
100%, yeah.
Yeah.
I've always been about that. It's like, I've got the food I eat. I wouldn't expect anybody to eat what I eat. I've got a macronutrient target and a calorie count that I want to get you to. Here's the calculator in front of you. We'll build the diet together. You tell me what you want to eat. We'll massage it around until the numbers fit what I want, and the food and the day fits what works for your life. And let's just measure it and see. We'll make adjustments from there.
Yeah, and that can be a bit of a hard concept though for prospective clients, because they do sometimes have a tendency to say, no, you just tell me what to eat.
Yeah.
And it's not the best way, probably. It's probably better if they are the driver and you guide them.
Again, the analogy I use is for guys going, imagine you go into a suit shop to buy your first suit. You've got no idea what a lapel is or what double-breasted or single-breasted is or anything else like that. And when the tailor says to you, what do you want? You're like, it's all French to me. So the tailor goes and grabs a 3-piece double-breasted suit, puts it on them, doesn't fit, doesn't matter, just goes, there you go, here's a starting point. What don't you like? And let the person go from there. So if a person says to me, I don't know, I go, okay, well, here's an example diet. It meets the calorie count that I want. These are the foods that make it all up. What don't you like? And if they go, I like all of it, go, great, give it a try for a week. Come back to me in a week or a day and say, can't eat that anymore, it's awful. And we'll make a change. But just try it on. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. So given that you are a body transformation expert,
someone called me it, so therefore I am. Yeah, I did something once, someone called me an expert.
So, for those that are listening and are wanting to create some significant changes, what do you see as the major key ingredients for results?
Training. It's training heart, soul, and intensity. It's lifting like you actually give a damn of becoming a better athlete than you are right now. If you don't have that fire in the belly to actually lift bigger stuff because it's just cool, because it would just be neat to be able to lift some really cool stuff because it's big and, the boys lift it or whatever. If you don't have that, you don't care and it's all just an imposition to you, well, you're probably going to struggle to make any kind of significant improvement.
I'm hearing heavy is a theme.
It's not heavy. It's more that it's the inner psychopath. You do it when you do your deadlifts and you go totally crazy and you tear that thing up, and it's like that thing, that heart, that real just, I'm going to beat that piece of metal. It's not going to beat me. Anyone who's got that, it's not that hard, generally speaking.
Yeah.
And the people who are scared of the weight and don't like the work and don't care and don't want to, those are always the people who struggle. So I could have answered that question and gone, the planning's really important and the measuring. So don't just do ignorant stuff. Actually measure your body composition, set a goal, measure it as you go and make adjustments based on it. But you can do that. And if you don't have the heart for the training, if you don't really, really lift like you want to lift, then all the rest of it's kind of for naught. Unfortunately, there's the people out there with the most beautiful bodies in the world are the people out there who are just genetically gifted enough that they were born beautiful. They can just lift anything any old way, and they seem to get stronger and leaner and better and all the rest of it. They've got great skeletal structures and muscle attachments, and they just look good. And a lot of people look to that and think that's all that it takes. And for you, me, and the majority of people who don't have that genetic blessing where we were all already, amazing looking before we started physically. It's the training that makes all the difference in the world. The success you've had is down to you're one of the rare people who can actually lift like that, lift like you mean it, like you actually want to beat that bar and be the girl who can lift the weight you couldn't lift last week. And the people who have that, the rest of it kind of comes easy because it's no one doesn't enjoy that progress. Tony Robbins is famous for saying progress is the thing that we all lust after in anything that we do. We just want to see improvements. We want to see some kind of payoff for the effort that we put in. So I think people love seeing the progress once they start getting it, but they've just got to get started. And that really, way beyond the nutrition is the training. Everyone goes, it's 90% nutrition. Absolutely no way. Give bodybuilders training to a person who plays golf, they're not going to look like a bodybuilder. They're going to look like a golfer. If you want to get leaner and more muscular, you have to treat your training like you actually want to be that athlete who can lift more than you do. And then everything else kind of it's a lot easier once you've got that passion for it.
I'll just digress a little bit and take us back to when I signed up with you. And
it was a very cool day. It was really cool.
Well, I kind of thought that I was going to impress you, Damon, and I was going to go down there and show you how strong I was. And I remember coming back with my tail between my legs because you got me to train, and you brought something out of me that I didn't know was there. And the training was very hard. You made me train very intensely. And I thought to myself, I was kind of disappointed with myself. And I realized that I hadn't been pushing myself the way I thought I had. But that's a good thing, because that is our role as trainers and coaches, is to bring clients up to another level that they don't know that they have with training. And so for those that are just listen to what you had to say, I got a bit motivated when you were talking, even then, about attacking the weight, attacking the iron. And I hope that the listeners actually go out there, because I know now that everyone that trains can find another 10, 15, 20% in them. Undoubtedly, they really can.
Oh, geez, the way most people train these days, there's another 100% in there. Like it's, and I mean, I mean that not disrespectfully, but it's one of the most frustrating things for me has been the fact that as the fitness industry's encroached on the weight training industry, it's brought that mediocrity and that concern for safety at the expense of performance into the gyms, such that people everywhere, they've never even seen a person train hard anymore. It's so much harder to get a person to actually do what they were capable of doing day one, but when they'd never learned anything in the gym, than it ever used to be, because literally they've been trained to be soft and trained to be weak and trained in the belief it's like the opposite of the 4-minute mile. Apparently it was impossible to run a mile in 4 minutes until one guy ran a mile in 4 minutes, and all of a sudden 20 more people did it within the month afterwards. Yeah. It was like once that psychological barrier had been broken, everyone was suddenly able to do it. Now it's something that there's high school kids are doing it, the sub 4-minute miles. So what's happened in our society now, though, is the opposite, is that people are being convinced that actually it's not even, it's the weight training equivalent of not being able to run a mile in 10 minutes. And everyone's just sort of going, I couldn't possibly try running it in 9 minutes 50 because, something bad could happen. And it's just, there's a 4-minute mile in you. You've got to just go for it. And that's the, I believe, leading cause of the frustration and the failure that a lot of people are having, is because the training, they don't even know what it looks like to train properly hard in a way that's going to make their body change as fast as it's capable of doing.
And that's so interesting, because everybody that isn't getting quite the success that they want, they still say, "Oh, but training's the easy part. It's my nutrition."
No idea.
No. So yeah, I'm hearing you. Now I'm gonna go somewhere with a question that I promised some of my followers because they wanted to know. And what's really interesting with this, Damon, is that I ran a powerlifting little seminar on Zoom, and oh my gosh, I got asked a curly question, and I said to her, "Oh, that's really interesting. Sounds like you train the way that I used to train. Who's your coach?" And she happened to say Amy. And I said, "Oh, right." And then I said, "And you're considering going an polar opposite way. Who are you considering as a coach?" And she actually said, "My current coach." And I said, "Oh my goodness, you're in exactly the same dilemma as me." Now, this is a really, I'm still torn with this, and I know that this will frustrate you a little bit, but can you talk a little bit about training to failure versus training for powerlifting based upon very carefully constructed percentages?
Sure.
This is going to be very interesting for a lot of people that follow me, Damon. They're really interested in your answer.
Essentially the fundamental belief, the foundational belief upon which powerlifting programs are generally structured is a very, very, very old belief that the strength performance is purely a function of skill. It comes from back at a time when the medical community generally worked with the philosophy that the human body doesn't actually fundamentally alter itself physically, as in grow new muscle tissue, etc., etc. It's all just the application of skill. So if you train to be a 100-meter sprinter, you don't actually get faster. The muscles don't actually learn to contract faster. The fibers don't change to faster twitch fiber types. You just become more skillful at how you stride, and that's how you become faster, right? We know that's not true now. We know that you actually can make muscles train to contract faster and so on and so forth. The powerlifting programs of old tend to be based, one, on that belief. So they're very, very against ever training to failure, because all training is just about training for skill. And now, if your belief system is that you're training to just develop skill, that's all that you're doing, then yes, at some point you need to put some heavy weight on your body. You never need to do more than 5 reps set, because why would you do reps anyway? That's not what you're training for. And you'd never ever want to go beyond that limit at which you can use absolutely textbook perfect technique. So you should never ever go to failure, because they would see that as training for bad technique, the point at which the technique breaks down a little bit.
Yep.
Now, that's sure. I don't agree with that philosophy. My belief system is the body's an adaptive organism, and it does grow muscle tissue, and the more muscle tissue you have, the more weight that you can move. And so in order to do that, one of the principles I believe in is your training needs to make sense for what you're trying to achieve. If you don't understand why you're doing what you're doing, then when it doesn't work, you can't be surprised, and you can never figure out a way to improve it or actually get the result that you want, because you never even understood why you were doing what the hell you were doing in the first place.
Makes sense to me.
Right. So it's very, very important that you can go, I am doing this because this is what I want to happen. I'll quickly also put in there, there's within the same philosophical circles as the idea that powerlifting is training for skill, is that bodybuilding's training for hypertrophy. And you'll notice they like using this very complicated word, hypertrophy, instead of growth. And that's because not all hypertrophy is growth. Hypertrophy just means an increase in the size of the cell. So if you go from a low-carb diet to a high-carb diet, you get hypertrophy in every cell in the body. Does that mean that you grew? Not in what you or I mean. We'd go, yes, I enlarged, but I just swelled up. I've still got the same amount of muscle. I'm not a better athlete. It doesn't mean that if I keep eating carbs next week that I'm going to grow that muscle again. You know, I'm going to add another 2 or 3 kilos. So a lot of the hypertrophy training, again, is done with 8-week studies on how can we get as much, essentially, inflammation and glycogen into the muscles as possible in a short period of time, because that's what all the studies are for. And so the hypertrophy training that you hear about is volume-based again, because do a bunch of volume, get a bunch of inflammation, get a bunch of swelling in the muscles, and yeah, you'll get a measurable increase in the size of the cells. But does that mean that you'll get as much muscle in 52 weeks, in another year's time, as you could have had you trained to actually grow muscle that lifts more? So I kind of work this middle ground where I go, I don't want to train for hypertrophy. I don't want to just swell my muscles up and constantly spend my time keeping them swollen to the same level when it's at the expense of ongoing progress. I look at most bodybuilders and go 10 years of drug abuse and hypertrophy training, and they're the same size they were 10 years ago. That's not effective training by my standards. And then I look at powerlifters and I see 10 years of training and they can bench squat and deadlift 5 kilos more than they could 10 years ago because their skill is basically at the ceiling that it gets to, and the training's not efficient for growing muscle, just as the hypertrophy training's not efficient for growing muscle. So my philosophy for training is I want to train to stimulate the body to be able to lift heavier stuff. And that means I'm going to, if I want to bench press 200 kilos for a set of 10 reps, let's say 140 kilos for a set of 10 reps, and the best I've ever done is 5 reps, then I'm going to attack my 140 kilos today like I want to do the 10 reps today. Why would I do 4 sets of 3? It's like, if I can already do 5 and I want to do 10, why am I stopping? It doesn't make sense. I don't need to practice my skill. I want to be the guy who can do 10. So I'm going to try to punch out as many as I can until the weight stops me.
Yeah.
And when I punch out as many as I can and the weight stops me, and let's say I just get my 6th rep up, then I can go, awesome. Last week I could do 5 when I was doing everything I could to get as many as possible. This week I could do 6. That's progress. So now I've got confirmation that my training's working, and it also makes sense. I'm training like I want to do 140 for 10. I've structured my program and I've just gone up another step closer. That's success. And it's immediate. And because I know by training to the limit of my ability, I know every week exactly where the limit of my ability is, then as soon as it starts to flatten off for whatever reason, then I can go, this isn't good. I need to make a change. Maybe I need more sleep. Maybe I need more food. Maybe I need to back off on my training, restructure the program, whatever it is. As soon as the progress dips off, I can make a change, which means that all of the things that we hear about, recovery and overtraining and all of these sorts of things, I throw all of them out. I don't care. I don't know how to measure recovery. I don't know what it means. I mean, I know what it means, but it's just like, I care about progress. I can measure whether I'm making progress because I always train to the limit of my ability. And if the limit of my ability stops going up, then I make a change in my program to make sure it keeps going up, philosophically. Now, to do that, what I very quickly find is I can't do 6 sets of squats 4 days per week. I find that out on the second workout. And people will, and I get the criticism from the powerlifters where they just go, your training can't work because you just get injured. And it's like, well, I'm not injured. Why would I get injured? And they go, because if I trained to failure and did squats 4 days a week, then I'd get injured. And it's like, well, of course you'd get injured if you did squats 4 days a week to failure. Don't do it 4 days per week. Oh, but then I'm not doing volume. To which I go, why do you need volume? And they can't answer that. It's just, well, you just do. And it's like, well, I don't do any volume. I do 1 set once a fortnight and my strength goes up. If I try doing more than that, then it doesn't. So why do I need volume? Because you do. But I don't use volume and I do make progress. Why do I need volume? They can't answer it. And it's because I measure it and I just go, this is the application of the scientific method. It's not borrowing results from someone else doing something else somewhere else. It's going, I'm testing me. I'm eliminating all other variables. I do this work, I eat this food, and I measure whether it works. And I've got a philosophy for why it works. If it doesn't work, I can rationalize an adjustment and see if that works. And it means that you're always training smart. It makes sense. And it's based off a solid philosophical foundation rather than a foundation that straight away I can go, that's not what I'm training for. I don't need to improve my skill. I can improve my skill in all my warm-up sets and my work sets anyway. And I don't just want needless inflammation. I actually want to become a superior athlete who's growing muscle and getting stronger as a function of that. It's actually a radically different philosophy to everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's about as clear as what you can get, I think, with that answer.
In 5 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, no, that was good. That was good. There's a lot of take-home stuff there. All right, just before we go, just any of your thoughts, any exercises that you just shouldn't do that people are doing ad nauseum?
Yeah, pretty much anything to do with muscle activation or involving bands. It's a pet peeve because muscle activation, again, it's about making sense. And you go, muscle activation is a great solution to not having muscle activation. But the other solution to muscle activation is just moving in the right damn way. If you stick your ass back when you start a squat, your glutes engage. If you don't stick your ass back, they won't. Using a rubber band to fake flexing your butt is not the solution to the problem. You just need to squat properly. You don't have neuromuscular degeneration. You don't need a rubber band to do rehabilitation.
What, you didn't get out your resistance bands through COVID?
I didn't. I went and got a barbell. I bought a barbell and some plates home. So
why does that not surprise me, Damon?
Why would I do anything else?
All right. So if anyone wants to find out a little more about you and Recomposer, what's the website address? Hit us up.
Well, recomp.com.au. There's a new information site on Recomposer coming. Excuse that, Belle.
Yeah.
So that will be available very soon.
Okay, awesome. Sounds good. So thanks very much for joining me this evening. It was great talking to you. I reckon there's got to be a part 2 somewhere down the track, Damon.
I'm always up for it. Always love chatting with you.
All right. Thanks a lot. I really, really appreciate it. And we'll speak soon, okay?
Thanks, son. Look forward to it.
All right.
Catch you.
Ciao.
Bye.